So welcome back to Restless. My name is Father Joseph Gill, priest of the Diocese of Bridgeport, and you've joined myself, Diane, and Joe as together we seek the face of Christ. And one of the best ways and places to seek the face of Christ is in silence. And Joe just came off of a 30-day silent retreat, which is way longer than I've ever done. 6 days was my lengthiest retreat. Yeah. Yeah, 30. I don't know if I'd want to do a 30-day. You had a few breaks, though, in between. Just not like 30 straight days.
We had 2.5 break days.
2.5 break days?
Yeah, so this was the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola, and they're divided into 4 weeks. They're not full weeks, but they're for 4 different periods, and in between each one there ended up being a break. Ordinarily, that just meant that as opposed to doing 4 or 5 holy hours a day, you do 2, as you do one at like 7 a.m. and then one at like 8 p.m. and in between you were free. The last break day was a surprise. Like we didn't know it was coming. The other 2 we knew they were coming the day before, and then the last one it was like a Saturday. And in the morning you meet with your spiritual director for like half an hour or so, and he was like, "Oh, by the way, today's normal, but then after mass 11:30, you guys can talk until a nighttime holy hour date." So that was, again, half a day. I mean, it wasn't a full day.
Yeah. Wow. So was that hard? 30 days without talking?
Yes. Although I should say that you do a good deal of talking on a silent retreat. I mean, again, you talk to a director for half an hour, talk during mass. After a few days, you talk to yourself. Some people were talking to deer and various other fauna, and probably some flora too, for all I know. So I started praying. I mean,
I'm afraid I'd go insane. That's why I don't want to do it.
Well, yeah, one of the break days, I said to my friend, "So how you doing?" And he goes, "Well, I'm talking to deer. How are you doing?" So, yeah, it was a hard yes.
When the deer start responding, that's when you have to get worried.
Yeah.
Bambi? What?
And so we were at Mundelein Seminary, but we were actually at the Joseph Mary Retreat House. So Mundelein, have you been to Mundelein?
I've never been there. No.
It's gorgeous.
It's out in Chicago.
Yeah, it's like maybe an hour or so, maybe a little bit less outside of the actual city of Chicago. It's on a lake. It's gorgeous, and there's a path around the lake. And so we were at the retreat house also on this lake, along this path. There's a ton of deer. You would have liked it because all kinds of like bugs and berries,
other things to eat.
Yeah, so you could have foraged. You would have had a good time.
I probably would have.
Yeah,
spent all day eating.
It was like as
weeds.
Rural as I would have liked to be for that long. Like at the high water mark of how rural I could tolerate for that long. So
Gotcha.
It was nice. It was also very difficult.
Yeah, what was the most difficult part? I mean, did you get bored in your prayer?
Well, this is gonna sound terrible, but like, by the time you're done with the retreat, the holy hour is just like another thing. Like at least have something to do for the next hour. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because otherwise, you know, it's not just that you're not talking. Like, you're also not really supposed to read novels usually. So your reading is pretty curtailed because you don't want the whole thing is engaging the imaginative part of your brain, right? Like, 'cause you're engaging in prayer, in deep prayer, and it's imaginative in a lot of ways. So you can't like also have characters bouncing around your head.
That's fair.
So you can have. You could totally be possible to be silent for 30 days and never have interior silence. And I definitely could see at different points of retreat where I could feel myself letting go of the spirit of the interior silence. So you have to be careful about that, which ends up meaning that there are fewer things to do than you would even imagine. So that's difficult. Also, I've been having some health problems this year, and that was more of a challenge than I thought would be on the retreat actually. And also you do eventually just go a little bit mad where you're just like, I can't, like, I need to talk. Like when the last break day came, we were all like, thank goodness. You know what I mean? Like, I need to be able to say something to somebody. So,
I mean, did you get a lot of sleep in? Because
that was part of the problem.
Oh,
yeah. Most people did, I'm sure. That was part of my problem was not sleeping so much, which, as it turns out, was an issue. Some people do like nighttime holy hours. I was never asked to do one, and I would have politely declined the offer had I been asked to do one. Some people pray well at night. I would have been, it wouldn't have worked, I don't think.
The times that I've been on silent retreats and done like 3 a.m. holy hours, they're the fastest holy hours. And I don't fall asleep, but they're the fastest holy hours I've ever done.
How long
honestly,
did they take you?
It took me an hour, but it felt like 15 minutes.
Really?
You kneel down and you just get part of your brain just gets into this rhythm, and you're just like, it's beautiful.
There's an interesting thing that happens sometimes where you're like, I don't have the mental capacity to do a holy hour right now, and God's like, excellent, here's all the grace that you need, and that does happen sometimes. It's probably what's happening at a 3 a.m. holy hour. It's like, I can't do this. And it's like, of course you can't do it. You can't do it anyway. So, here's my grace.
For a while, I felt God asked me to do a penance of getting up at 3 a.m. every morning, and just to go make a visit to the chapel and go back to bed. And then my sleep, I was dragging throughout the day after a few weeks. I was like, this ain't working out.
Yeah. 3 a.m. holy hours are not for me.
No,
No.
not an early morning person.
No. I'm a.
But that's not. I mean, 3 a.m. is barely early. That's technically early morning, but it's really the middle of the night.
Middle of the night.
Let's
yeah.
not pretend here.
I
You
mean,
know
I
what
guess I'm a night owl,
which
so
is
maybe
good.
I could just extend it. But
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You are? Okay.
Yeah, but I don't know if I would drive to the chapel at 3 a.m.
See, I've become more like, not that I'm a morning person necessarily, but I have to go to bed earlier. Like I'm
Okay.
passing out by like 10 o'clock, or what time is it right now? 11:15 in the morning apparently today. But but none of this to do with the retreat. But yeah, it's a good experience for sure.
So tell me about. I've never done the spiritual exercises of Saint Ignatius of Loyola. It's a very classic way to pray, and I'm particularly never been drawn to Jesuit spirituality.
Sure.
Perhaps because of the Jesuits I know. But
Ouch.
I'm sorry.
How dare you? I don't even know what you're talking about.
I've met a few good ones, few and far between.
We had a really great Jesuit on the retreat. His name is Father Hugo, and he's in his 90s. He lives in Fordham, but he spent most of his life as a missionary to Africa.
Wow.
And he gave, I should have thought, I did think of it, it just didn't really come up in our episode on celibacy, but he gave one of the best, like, little images of celibacy I've ever heard one of his homilies. Very, very good man. He was my director, but
What was the image?
he was talking about how when he was deported from Nigeria once for, like, criticizing the government over something. And he was really on the plane. He was just kind of really just mourning. Like, he had all these friends. His whole priesthood at that decade, had been in Nigeria. And he was going to miss all those people. He didn't know if he'd ever be back. And he felt God saying to him, like, yeah, but there's other people that I want you to love, other experiences I want you to have. And you have to die to this to have that. And he goes, and then I realized that's what celibacy is. You have to die to certain things to be available to so many others. And I was like, whoa, that's awesome. So
Truth.
that was one of the great graces of the retreat, by the way. Having a lot of really good priests. There was like 8 priests living there. Because there's like 30 of us making the retreat. So there's like 38 priests in the house preaching, and really amazing.
So in the holy hours you had talks, or
No. But so for mass, so they would rotate through mass.
For mass. Okay.
Yeah. So each priest would only direct a handful of guys. So mine was Monsignor. He used to be the rector of St. Mundelein. Actually, a very nice guy.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. So yeah. So what did you think of the spiritual exercises?
Sure. Yes. I mean, just really as a kind of really brief background, the basic way it works is you meditate. You start by meditating on human sinfulness and your own personal sin. And so what it really looks like is you meet with your director in the morning, at least I met with mine in the morning, and he gives you however many passages he wants you to meditate with, and you do a holy hour per. So I had 4. Some people did 5 for a period of time or whatever. I only ever asked me to do 4. There are also meditations there's like a manual for this that we were given and the directors have, and there are exercises in it. So you'll do, so like for the sinfulness one, there'll be some where like you walk through like examination of conscience, or like, different things like that. I can talk more about some of those specific ones. I wish I thought to bring the book, but it's at home. So the first period is you meditate on human sinfulness and your own personal sin, and the goal is really to like to grow in a true conviction of the weight of your own sin. Then you moved into meditating on the incarnation and Christ's early life. And so that was really powerful. One of the really interesting ones from the book is you kind of meditate on just like picturing the Trinity and how the Trinity looks at Earth. And then you look at like humanity and you look at the Blessed Mother. And it was really interesting because after, you're praying through it, and what came to me there was like how loud the passionate love of the Trinity is for us, and how loud human chaos is. And how this is what, again, how my like perspective on it was in this prayer period, how it was the quiet of Mary that was able to receive the passion love of the Trinity, that the Trinity's, like, humanity was too loud to really receive the passion from the Trinity, and Mary it took somebody who was quiet and receptive enough to receive it. So that was a good thing. So you meditate on the incarnation, into Christ's early life, then you move into his ministry, so you pray through his entire ministry, into his passion. It's meant to pray through the passion, and ends with the resurrection, with a special emphasis on the joy of the resurrection, which sounds obvious, but I don't think I ever actually prayed on the reality of being joyful in the resurrection. And at that point too, you start to kind of wind down a little bit, and so you start praying about what the retreat is held. So you started praying through each week. I was invited to, after I prayed through the first 2 weeks, I was invited to make a prayer about them. Like if I were to say something about them to the Father, what would I say? And then finally I was asked to pray through the entire retreat and then put together with certain kind of outlines a prayer that is really more of an agreement that I was supposed to sign and date as like what does this like retreat mean for me going forward. So it it's obviously very reflective. There's an affective quality to it too, where it's like you are try to truly be convicted of your own sinfulness. You try to truly be convicted of the injustice of the passion, of the joy of the resurrection, stuff like that. That's kind of the broad outline. And there's other parts of it.
Were you able to get your emotions in line with those
That was
things?
that was one of my challenges. I was getting frustrated about it. And it's hard when you're in it to not think about the retreat or not to evaluate the retreat. And that's why on the break days they're very, very, very like assertive about do not talk about the retreat, do not compare with directors, because you'll end up ruining everything for yourself because he told you to do that, maybe I should try that. And one of the foundational parts of this, I'm sure it's true of the retreats you've done, Father, is your director is the Holy Spirit to you. Like that's how you're communicating with the Holy Spirit. So you do whatever the director says. If the director says don't read, you don't read. If he says you do read, you do read. Like you have to really, because you're putting yourself in his hands, so you have to really be in his hands. I was having a hard time with some of the affective stuff. A big thing you pray through is your own attachments. And maybe at some point we'll talk about what some of the graces that came from this, but that was particularly difficult for me. And I was kind of like, okay, no doubt I'm attached to a million things, but nothing was really coming up as like the thing. And I was kind of getting frustrated about it until I finally realized that what I was attached to was the priesthood. But I only realized that after the retreat finished. So like that's the other weird thing is you're done Thursday after mass at 5 o'clock. You're at dinner with everybody. The next day we shared graces with the whole group. The day after we flew home, or that night we flew home. The next day we shared graces just with our house. And I'm still unpacking a lot of what happened on the retreat. Like you think you're like, oh yeah, that's true. That you hear somebody say something, you're like, oh yeah, that reminds me of the thing that I was praying about in the retreat on day 15. And I should brought my notebook too. That would have been helpful, but
you were so unprepared. For this.
Obviously I spent minutes preparing for this episode.
That's right.
Not to mention the 30 days I spent doing the retreat, but yeah.
The only I've only prayed with one of the days of the retreat, and it was actually a really good one. It's the two standards.
Yes, everybody likes
it's kind of a classic. So Ignatius, of course, being a soldier himself, has a lot of military imagery within this whole thing, and the whole thing is which banner are you standing under, the banner of the world or the banner of Christ, and kind of contrast what do people look like under each banner, which direction are they marching, where is going to be the ultimate goal, purpose of where they're going, and that's a very nice one to do.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. There's also you make an election at some point where you there's like a resolution to the retreat, and different people experience things differently. Sometimes the guys during their when we were sharing our graces from it would say something about the retreat, and I'd be like, I don't recognize that at all. But that's just we have different experiences and different directors, and that's cool.
Sure.
Some people can really neatly tie up in a bow. This is what I prayed about, or this is what came from it. Mine's a little bit more all over the place and kind of, like I said, kind of shifting as I think about it and talk about it. But definitely grace-filled time. So
good.
Yeah, and I don't know what your experience was, Joe, but it sounds like I think a lot of times you go into, at least I've gone into retreats of thinking I'm gonna have this fantastic, mind-blowing experience, feel the presence of God running through the veins of my body and stuff, and I don't know. A lot of times I would say the majority of the retreats that I've been on, and I haven't been on that many, I have not felt that. There have been moments of grace, but I think looking back on certain retreats of just reflecting even on things that God was working on, that a lot of times you see the results in retrospect, but they don't actually they might not come to fruition until later on. So to not beat yourself up either, because I think people talk up retreats sometimes of you're gonna go on this retreat and your life is gonna be changed and you're just gonna be a completely different person. And I don't know.
I'm a little bit taller now. I'm a completely different person.
Yeah,
I'm a little bit taller now. So yeah.
How did that happen?
But that's not how God works. Not necessarily. Some people do have those experiences, but a lot of times you don't, and that's okay.
Well, it's interesting. Sometimes people conflate grace with consolation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I received lots of graces, aka I felt God's presence, but that's
Yes.
not the case, right?
Yep.
You can receive graces invisibly, silently, with no sensibility at all.
Yeah, without feeling. It's just to remember that the spiritual life is not about feeling, and you also can't really be the judge of how good this retreat was for you, because God is working.
I'm glad that they stressed to us not to compare retreats during the break days, because, everybody does this. You start comparing, and it's I remember, I bet this person's probably loving this, they love, and then afterwards it'd be yeah, so I had to have a day of half as many holy hours because I was exhausted. My spiritual director told me I needed to take a break. And whoa, did not know that at all. Or one guy was yeah, I went to my director and I told him I wanted to leave after 10 days, and he talked me off the ledge about it. And you're whoa, didn't see that coming. So, Yeah, so you just don't know. Yeah, I mean, you're not going to be like in ecstasy for 30 days. It only lasted 28 days for me, you know. So I was
Those last 2 days must have been really
oh
rough.
yeah, no, yeah, it's amazing how just like I don't know, like normal becomes after a few days.
Mm.
Like first, like I can't believe I'm doing this, and you're like, all right, gotta do another holy hour before lunch, or before mass. Then I'll have lunch. Probably do another holy hour. Maybe I'll go walk to the seminary today. Ooh, I can check out the library. Gotta make sure you get the third holy hour. And like you just start. It's like anything else. After a while, it's kind of wild that's the reality of it. It is so crazy. But yeah, eventually just becomes like anything else. Like, yeah, I think I'll look through a coffee table book for the next half hour, and then I'll have dinner. That'll be good. You know, like.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You know, it's funny you talk about retreats and the blessings and challenges. My retreats generally now, as a priest, so you're actually required by canon law to take a 5-day retreat every year. I must admit, I'm not perfect at that.
You're a criminal?
There are some times when I take a 3-day retreat, or not at all.
Silent
It's
retreat.
not good. Yeah, silent retreat. So you can do it a lot of different ways. You could do just a preached retreat where someone just preaches conferences and you listen to them, or a silent retreat by
I think
yourself.
a lot of priest retreats have included happy hour in the evenings. I think. I'm not joking
Yes,
about that, by the
they
way.
do. Yes, they
Sometimes
do. They do, which is why I don't do that.
Yeah, right. There's something to be avoided, but
No, my retreats are generally to go out in the wilderness
Yeah.
and just be with God, and that's why I'm not a huge Ignatius fan, because he's very regimented. He's like, you have to meditate on this, this, and this, and I'm like, I just wanted to like love Jesus and like go into the wilderness, kind of more Franciscan.
it's all vibes, right?
Yeah, get
all
some
good
vibes.
vibes.
Get some
Yeah.
vibes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I guess if you need structure, I think I have a book actually. I think it's meant for the spiritual exercises. Maybe it's meant for the 30 days.
Yeah, it's not. You wouldn't read it.
they
Yeah,
have
they
an,
were
have
like,
an-
this is not literature, so
It's
don't.
not.
And I was like,
It's not really
oh,
spiritual
dang,
reading either.
You know?
they
Like,
do have an 8-day version though. So
mm.
maybe you have the 8-day version. Smaller.
No, I think it's meant for like the 30-day thing, but it did give you like certain things to meditate on, and yeah,
It's surprisingly technical. Like there's like actual like almost jargon that you have to kind of be aware of as a director.
yeah, and I don't know. I think I did a few days, and then I was like,
Yeah, you also can't do it by your. I mean, you really shouldn't do it by yourself the first
Yeah.
time for sure.
yeah,
And there's some. I know priests who would kind of direct their own retreat, and that's fine because they're like they're knowledgeable enough and they're holy enough, and that works out. I mean, I certainly wouldn't do it. I wouldn't recommend it for a layperson.
No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't recommend lay people do the 30-day stuff.
No, I wouldn't recommend lay people doing their own retreat, like
doing their own
directing their own
retreat.
retreat. Like I think you need to have a director. So the 30 days is a great experience. I mean, how does layperson have 30 free days would be my question. But I also like you can't go into it thinking like
unemployed young adults.
Right. You can't go into it thinking like I pray, like I go to mass and I pray the rosary, so I'll be fine. Like no, you need to like I went into the retreat after a year of learning how to pray properly, how to meditate, and how to like stretch out meditation and get comfortable with silence. And we did a 3-day and a 5-day to kind of have a little bit of experience. Like you can't. It's the spiritual exercises. Like that's reality. Like halfway through, maybe even more, I went to my director and I was like, Monsignor, I thought at this point, like there'd be no distraction, like I'd be like totally invested in my prayer. I'm more distracted than ever, and like, what gives? And he goes, well, you're exhausted. Like if you were in boot camp on the 15th day, you'd be tired, and you're doing spiritual exercises. You're spiritually tired, so don't be too hard on yourself. Like and ease up on things. Like they encouraged us to take a break to take a step back from liturgy hours, even, or even to maybe not even pray the rosary every day, because you're here for a specific purpose of prayer. So all the other devotions will be there when you get back. But this is very now that doesn't mean that we have to do. Not all of us did, but that's a reality. Is like you have to recognize the reality of what it is. It's not a vacation. It's difficult.
Yeah.
It's not like people. Oh, it must have been so peaceful. I mean, it was, but it also wasn't. You know what I mean?
Mentally tiring. I'm sure.
Yeah.
And spiritually tiring too. Yeah, prayer can be exhausting.
oh yeah, no, that's I mean,
Which I think is why I like hiking and praying, because it gets me into the routine.
Yeah, I mean
It's kinda-
maybe that works really well for you. I find that oftentimes when I try to be moving while praying, like if I'm praying my rosary while walking, that does reduce the amount of focus I'm actually able to
Really?
enter into in prayer. That's just me.
Can you like not walk and chew gum at the same time? You one of those people?
No, I can do that. No, and I mostly pray my rosary while I'm walking or driving, but I just find that I'm not.
Not fully there.
Yeah, I tend to get a little bit distracted, but that's
That's funny. I'm the absolute opposite.
Huh?
If I sit down to pray my rosary, I get so distracted.
yeah, no,
Gotta
I
do something
pray
with
when
my
I
body.
run. I just don't bring my phone, and I meditate on like I am able to concentrate, but I like to move too.
Wow. Are you able to say the words while you're running?
In my head, yes.
Oh, in your head?
Yeah,
Okay.
but on each, I kind of have a
Hell,
like a
Mary,
meditation
full
for
of
each
Christ.
beat of like.
Sure.
No, it's at this. I mean, at this point, it's when you condition your body to like run every day, it's not like
Yeah, you're not
physically.
out of breath.
Yeah,
your
it's
first
not
mile.
like I wouldn't do it if I was sprinting or
Yeah, you go around Todd's Point. There are no hills there.
there are no hills there. Yeah, no,
Totally flat.
that's a very easy run.
I run in Monroe, Connecticut.
No,
Where
I don't.
hills were invented.
I don't run it.
Yeah,
I don't run it.
where all hills come from.
I run a bunch of hills around my house.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it's fine.
Yeah. So anyway, I was going to talk about this one retreat I went on last year. So this year I did a wonderful retreat down by the Delaware Water Gap, which is it's a neat place if you ever get a chance to go there. Great hiking, Appalachian Trail. But the year before, some friends of mine gave me their house in Vermont for a week. I was going to go make my retreat. It was late April. It was like April 20th. So I was like, spring in Vermont, beautiful, right?
Snow.
Snow, ice storm, and so, the first day I got a nice hike in. The second day I was going to go out and go hiking, but it was like an ice storm, so I couldn't. Third day it warmed up to about like maybe 40 degrees. So I was like, I'm going to do this anyway.
Yeah.
I know there's probably snow on the ground, whatever. So strap on my boots, drive up to the place. Nobody had plowed the parking lot of the trailhead. So I drive into this trailhead. The snow is like 6 inches deep. My car gets stuck.
Oh no.
Shocking.
Yeah, I know, right? So, and I'm also, by the way, out of gas. So,
Naturally.
like trying to rock the car back and forth, trying to go dig it out. So I have to go and walk half mile down the hill to a ski resort to ask for a shovel. So then I walk right back up the hill, dig it out. At that point, my battery was dead.
Right.
Yeah, it was pretty miserable. So calling AAA, AAA finally shows up like an hour later. I'm in my car, like freezing to death. And, they tow my car out and jump the battery and everything. And, finally, I was so angry and frustrated, honestly, at God, because I was like, here I am on this retreat. Like, I'm trying to encounter you in the beauty of nature. And this happened.
Yeah.
That I left the retreat a day early and I went home. I was like, I'm done. Because I couldn't be cooped up in that house one more day with terrible weather outside. I was like, I need to, do something. So, and I'm still trying to unpack, like, why did God allow that on a retreat? And I'm sure there was some grace, maybe. I don't have an answer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's difficult.
Could it be that you couldn't be alone with yourself for 5 days? That he was trying to show that to you? Like, to an extent, hiking's a great thing to do on a retreat, but it's also a bit of an escape, isn't it?
Not for me, no.
Okay.
No, for me, it's that's how I pray.
Oh, fair enough.
For me, if I was stuck in that house, I'd be reading all the books in that house, which are...
Yeah.
Most of them were edifying, but,
But not the point of a
the
retreat.
coffee table books of, like...
Yeah.
Waterfalls in Vermont, Spend half an hour doing that,
Right. Yeah, there was a book, it was like 1,000 Events That Shaped History, and that book was like, it was contested. It was like 6 of us reading it at any given point. And so you're trying to, like, after me, like, scope out, like, can I get the book? Can I get like 10 minutes with it? You know what I mean? It was very important by around day 20 to have that book.
Yeah. So, I mean, were you allowed to read any books other than...
Yeah, so again, this is up to your director. So I asked him in the beginning, because at my 5-day, I was like, I'm going to like read a Steinbeck novel. I'm going to read this. And I asked my director, and he was like, yeah, you probably should read no more than 5 minutes a day and like no novels. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. So so this one I asked, right, it was like one of the first questions I asked. And he was a lot more permissive, this director. He was like, yeah, just, just be careful. And like Lives of the Saints are good. So I read a biography of Maximilian Kolbe.
Nice.
Actually, really good biography. And what else? I read something else. I'm blanking on his name, but the story of a Jesuit, a Chinese Jesuit priest who was from China and was like, imprisoned because of the communists for however long. And it was an interesting story. And
Not Cardinal Ignatius Kung.
No, not Cardinal Kong. No, because I wasn't a cardinal. There were no books on Cardinal Kong there, and a couple like some other coffee table type things. And yeah, so I did a little bit of reading. I think a lot of people were told no reading at all, that's rough.
That is rough.
Like they were allowed like a book of art, stuff like that, which I didn't do, really.
Yeah. So yes, I think books are a great way in which God can speak to us on retreats.
Right.
Too, because a lot of times in prayer, we need to feed our intellect with some sort of substance in order to meditate on God and who He is.
And there are things like that where that are imaginative that help. Like, like my director gave me a poem. It wasn't for meditation, but I mentioned something after one of my meditation periods that reminded him of a poem by T.S. Eliot on the Three Magi. So he gave me that.
Oh, nice.
And it was actually interesting. Like he had me meditate on the English translation of Stabat Mater. One of the days in the Passion, which was very cool. So there were interesting non-biblical meditations that were useful.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, so explain a little bit about how to do intellectual meditation. Like, I mean, you kind of just like put yourself there in the scene.
So that's, I mean, there's different approaches. So that's what we'd call probably imaginative prayer, which some people are like to pray that way. That's not how I necessarily typically pray, but I will do it sometimes. And sometimes what I'll do is, like, let me just say, like, basically the way I approach most of my prayer periods, and still now, is so I'll read whatever passage it is once, give myself a few seconds or a minute, read it again, and just try to just kind of sit with it. And as I find myself getting distracted, I'll return to it. So I'm not trying to force myself to like stare at it until like a word pops out. I'm trying to let myself sit with it, and as I kind of need that spurring, and maybe I'll read it slower, I'll focus on one part, or I'll try reading it out loud. And sometimes it helps. Where it's like, okay, feel like I'm not getting anywhere. Let me just try to picture what this would have looked like. Okay, so this is, Jesus, the apostles seeing Jesus on the shore after the resurrection. So how that would look to them, like how would they have seen him? How would Jesus have seen them? I also, one of the interesting things about the retreat was that it didn't matter so much if one prayer period didn't really like work, quote unquote, because you were doing 120 of them over the course of a month. So like, oh geez, the last 3 didn't work well. I have 60 more, so I'm sure it's something. And like you would think like, oh yeah, I'm not really, it's been dry. You look back in your notebook, and go, wow, I'm actually there's a consistent threads. So yeah, so some people like to try to put themselves in the scene. I think that can be great. I do it sometimes. It's not the way I primarily pray. But I think that Ignatius has this big, one of his big things is there is no prayer without desire. Sometimes I'll just try to remind myself, like when I feel stuck, okay, what is my desire right now? Like I'm not just praying, I'm not just like I'm not chit-chatting with Jesus right now. I'm here to try to really enter a deep conversation with him. So like, do I have a desire? And sometimes it's like, oh, I don't think I have a desire. What's the text pointing me to? Oh, maybe the desire should be a growth in humility because that's what this text is about. And some reason, something's making me not want to think about that, right? So, and yeah. One thing that, again, I said we spent the whole year learning how to pray, but really the retreat taught me how to pray a lot better. And I've seen that afterwards, even though it's a little bit more difficult coming back into the normal world. But yeah, I feel a lot more, because before the temptation was to try to make like a Bible study. So you want to have a paragraph you can write about the text when you're done. And I realized that that's not what I'm doing here. And so it's okay if I finish my holy hour one day and I don't know even what I was really praying about, what the resolution from it was, because it's like, well, Jesus is still here tomorrow, so we can meditate on the exact same thing.
Which I think that's an important point, that in prayer God leads.
Yeah.
You can't try to force it.
Right.
You show up, you do your part, and then God can either give you a great consolation or remain silent. It's up to him.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, like it sounds kind of silly, but like the retreat proved to me that prayer is real, because the temptation would be, and we all fall into this, it's like, am I just talking to myself right now?
Yeah. Just psychological.
Yeah. But the reality is that sometimes you get a passage, you're like, oh, okay, we're going to be praying about detachment. And you get to the holy hour and you're like, oh God, you wanted to talk about celibacy. Okay. That's different than I thought, but I didn't get there myself. Right. So like you have led me to this meditation for some reason. So, okay. We're doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, God is the leader. He is the ultimate director, as you said, the Holy Spirit, right?
Yeah.
He's the ultimate director. But, I had a wise priest in college who often said, pray as you can, not as you can't.
Yeah.
And I think it's more important that you pray than how you pray. Because everyone prays in a very different way. And the Ignatian spirituality is a beautiful spirituality. It's not for everybody,
right?
But you got a lot out of it.
Yeah.
Sounds like, and it's...
I'm not saying that all of it is how I would pray all the time, but even like on our 5-day, the director of our spiritual year going into it was like, when he says, if your director says pray for 45 minutes, make sure you're there for 45 minutes. Don't move. If you feel like you're not getting anywhere, pray the rosary, do something, but don't leave the chapel for 45 minutes. You know what I mean? And that was actually another surprising thing, was how little time I spent praying in the chapel for a lot of it. Like I would do like...
Oh, you could do holy hours elsewhere?
Anywhere you wanted. There were no mandatory holy hours. You set your entire schedule. So... Oh,
interesting.
So if you wanted to do it, there was 2 chapels in the building we were in. Then there was a shrine on going one direction on the trail, and then the seminary on the other. But it was beautiful. So sometimes I would literally like... Google a picture of Mundelein Seminary. You'll see that there's like this beautiful like boardwalk type thing that like reaching out, almost like it's actually modeled off St. Peter's Basilica into the lake. I would pray there sometimes. There's a little courtyard that was like stone and nice and cool, and I would pray there a lot.
Well, that's good, because variety, I think, is very important in the spiritual life.
Yeah, and sometimes it's the only thing you have. It's like, all right, well, I'll walk for a half hour, get somewhere, then I'll pray there. Some guys would walk to the beach and pray. Yeah, totally open. So that towards the end I did it more, but at the beginning I almost did no holy hours in the chapel because there's a lot of people in there. pews are often not comfortable. I'm not here like I'm here
You
to
can't
meditate.
kneel for 5 hours a day.
Yeah,
and
well, there was an
that's-
oratory in the basement that's like a pre-Vatican II thing. One guy, every one of his holy hours, he brought down a chair and a kneeler. I one time saw him with a pillow on the floor. No judgment. That's cool. I
Hey, you gotta do what you gotta do,
I
man.
do it sometimes too. Like that's great. It's like I'm here to meditate, so there's no judgment. The judgment-free zone.
Absolutely.
If you want to stand up, if you want to like walk around, I would sometimes like I need to get up for a second. I've been saying too much. I'll walk around. You're still praying. It's fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So-
yeah. Well, that's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that God gave you so many graces, and that
Yeah.
as difficult as it was a benefit to your spiritual life, and that's what a retreat should be. So I know most of us probably can't take 30 days off of our job or out of our school and go on retreat, but perhaps we can take an afternoon, perhaps we can take a day, or maybe a couple days just to be alone with the Lord and allow Him to speak, because He is the director, the leader. Find a good book, a good spiritual book. Find the Bible. Pray wherever.
Find the
Find the
Bible.
Bible. You should have one at home.
Bible.
I lose mine all the time.
Where'd he go? Where'd he go now?
It's a struggle, right? But I challenge all of our listeners to take a little bit of time to be on retreats, just to be with the Lord, because that's such a powerful way to renew our spiritual life and renew our zeal for following Christ. You can find us on Veritas Catholic Network, 1350 AM and 103.9 FM, and wherever you get your podcasts. So tune in next time to Restless.